All right, welcome in everyone. UGA football live with JC Shelton here after Georgia, Tennessee in Athens. Guys, did that feel like a playoff game to you? I mean, absolutely, dude. All the implications, the SEC championship race, the college football playoffs. Georgia feels disrespected. They're number 12 in the country. They're the first team out. Coming in and playing one of the best defenses in the country, possibly the best in the SEC to this point, with everything on the line. Blackout in Sanford Stadium. The crowd, electric. And Georgia comes out and puts together, quite possibly, other than Texas, the best game all season. When Georgia is against the wall, they play their best. And that's, folks, we talked about it a little bit because my voice was messed up all week why we didn't get to go. But we talked about it a little bit in the snippet I put out yesterday about Georgia's chances at making the playoff and how that has added a different factor into this matchup because Kirby Smart does such a good job of getting his team ready, right? Mentally feeling the expectations and answering in kind, answering with the talent execution that we know we've seen them play like at times this season. And this was the first game in Sanford in a month, and you had that added as well. We were wondering, like, why was this line 10 points? Well, that's why. 31-17, folks. And Georgia comes out with a victory, 8th straight win against Tennessee in the Vols, whether you're listening on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Last week's show, Instant Reactions, wasn't a fun one, folks. I'll tell you that right now. Wasn't a fun one. There was a lot of issues. I don't know what team showed up in Oxford, Mississippi last week, but it wasn't this one. I don't know. Did Georgia just send out clones? Because this was an incredible performance by these guys, especially up front, right? Let's think about that. Georgia allowed, 5 sacks? Was it 5 sacks last week? Right? 0 sacks tonight against Tennessee. A really good defensive front. We talked about that. These guys get after it. Now, they made some plays, right? But they didn't have consistent pressure on Carson Beck, who had a legacy game for him. Here's the thing, folks, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself at the end of this one when it was already wrapped up, where are the Mike Bobo and Carson Beck haters going to be tonight? Are they already in bed? I don't think they're on social media. They're probably not watching this show because that's the easy play, isn't it, folks? Right? When something goes awry on the offense, whose fault is it? It's not the offensive lines. It's not the receivers who lead the country and drop passes. It is the quarterback and the offensive coordinator. And I'll tell you, those two answered the bell. They deserve some flowers, okay? And you can take back the slander. It's not too early for me, okay? I'll give you a pass, absolutely, right? Because Mike Bobo called a beautiful, beautiful game today. It felt like, especially, let's say, Georgia's down 10-0 in the first, folks. 10-0 at home. The crowd, you could tell from the broadcast. Wasn't there, was covering nationally for Athlon Sports all day. You could tell from the broadcast that the crowd was kind of out of that one after that first quarter. And then Georgia scores 17 unanswered. And then it was 24-31. Tennessee did not score a point in the second half. And it was funny to me, folks, because, in listening to Kurt Herbstreit and Fowler, I love those guys. I think they do a great job. But it was a little odd at the end of that one because Kurt said something, along the lines of Georgia got away with this one. Georgia ended up on top. No, this was not a game in the second half. It wasn't. Tennessee scored a touchdown after that first quarter, right? Or first part of the game. It might have been early second when they scored that last touchdown or a field goal. But it was all Georgia beyond that. I mean, and think about that, guys. Last week, we didn't see, there was not pressure on Jackson Dart. Quick pass game killed him. Georgia offensive line, right? We couldn't protect. And it just limits everything. Of course, Carson Beck's going to have a bad game. Of course, the offensive play calling isn't going to be what you would like it to be because they have to adjust to that. They were getting whipped up front. This game, completely reversed. It's incredible, guys. I don't know. I don't really know because you have 5 sacks on Nico tonight, who's a gamer. Absolutely. I think he deserves some flowers as well. Nico, I expected him to make more mistakes than he did. As a redshirt freshman, I think he's going to be a really good player in this league. And Georgia's, we're going to have to face them, right, next season and probably one more after that before he goes to the draft. He is an absolute gamer, tough kid, hard to get down, made some good decisions, right? But Tennessee just couldn't threaten Georgia down the field. Tennessee had 0 passes of 20 yards or more, 0. They had 1 run of 20-plus yards. That was a touchdown. 1 run. I mean, this is, one of the better offenses, rushing offenses, I should say, in the country. You led them to 146, which is a light day for them. 3.7 yards per carry. I think Georgia could live with that. That defense performance there, man, it's so tough. Think about that, guys. When you're body blow to body blow, they're going to run it. You got to stop it. And Georgia was aggressive. They did not back down. The inside linebackers was really impressed after they got kind of caught, right? They got caught overcommitting on that rush touchdown for Tennessee in the first. And they answered it by playing really well. Raylan Wilson, Smile Mondon had a great game. And getting him back in that lineup has been nice because you rotate, keep those guys fresh because they're taking on 6'5", 340-pound offensive guards and tackles all game, right? Having those guys back in, I think it's great. And it's so interesting when you think about that because, Tennessee had chances to get back in it in the second. They went 10 of 18 on third down, right? It felt like every time they got into a short situation, they were going to get that because the offensive line, hey, props to them. That's a good unit. Dylan Sampson is a great player. He's probably going to be in the NFL. But Georgia made the plays in the second half, man. And that's what it because entering that second, it was like, man, whoever has the ball last is going to win this game. But no, Georgia answered with physicality in that second half and pulled off a great win, an absolute great win with everything stacked in Tennessee's favor as far as, I lost 7 straight. We're number 7, Georgia's number 12. Going to their house, we're going to prove to the playoff committee, we're going to prove to college football that we can play with the elite teams. Hold on. Because Georgia, when it shows up and it's at best, you don't want to play them. You don't want to play him. And Carson Beck, dude, I was so impressed with him. Good decisions. Just good decisions, guys. And I think last week we saw that too. And you heard me talk about it. I thought he was going to play better at home. I really did. Obviously, Vegas thought the same, 10-point spread here against a really good team who deserves this ranking. I think Tennessee deserves this ranking. Absolutely. We might see him again in the playoff. I think they should go to the playoff. That defense is really good. Nico makes good decisions in a tough environment like that. I like him. But Georgia, as far as answering the bell and Carson Beck answering the bell when, and he hears this stuff, kids these days, guys, just think about that. Like social media, they see that. They hear that. They read the articles. They hear the podcasts, clips. And everybody calling for you to get benched for Gunnar Stockton, who hasn't played in anything but garbage time in his career, or, Arizona State transfer who hasn't seen much of the field in his career. They see that stuff. And how much more challenging is that to play well, right? And then you add the factor in is, Georgia had 4 drops tonight. And that's why it started 4 of 12 early, I think he did. He started 4 of 12 early, drops, multiple drops. Guy's not in the right spot. He's throwing outside, which he should be because the safety is playing inside. And London Humphrey's looking the other direction somewhat. Like, why? We don't know. It's not right. How much of a factor does that play in his trust? I'm not a Carson Beck apologist. I think he's made a lot of bad mistakes this season. But over the last 2 games, he's made a lot of good ones, mostly good ones. Hasn't thrown it to the other team. Last week he did tip pass, but so many good decisions and moments to where he could have forced it, right? He could have forced it. Instead, he's throwing it out of the end zone. He's hitting his check down, right? He's using his legs. And that's when we know. Was that the turning moment to you guys? when he scrambled for a first down and threw that shoulder? That's what it felt like to me. I'm curious of what you guys think. Jump in the comments and we'll talk about it. But that's what it felt like to me is when he threw that shoulder, and as a teammate, you see that. It's like, he's your prize quarterback in the Lamborghini, right? He's NFL draft pick. He's got to protect his body. No, he's going to throw that shoulder in Sanford Stadium to get a first down against a really good team because he wants to win. And I love that. And I think that's what kind of sparked that offense just a little bit. Guys started catching, which is crazy to say when we think about this, guys. Georgia's the best recruiting program in the country. These kids are talented. There's a reason they wear that G on their chest. And they're dropping passes, just routine screens, slants. Not even the 50-50 balls. Those are tougher. I'm talking about the easy ones that are just you can't do it. This is drive killers. And despite all that, Carson Beck answers. Makes a lot of great decisions, ends up with a huge day. Let's look at his stats here. Let me pull them up real quick. 25 of 40. And like I said, he started off poor. Drops were a big part of that. 25 of 40, 347, 2 touchdowns, a rating of 151 against a really good defense, folks. That's a defense who shut everybody down. Nobody has scored 20 points on that defense this season. They played Alabama. Very impressive. This is absolutely impressive. If Carson Beck plays like that, right? Now, when you think of the national, that's where it gets tough, folks. That's where it gets tough because you think about the playoff teams Georgia would most likely play, right? If you beat Georgia Tech here in a couple of weeks, you'll be in. And those teams, can you afford the mistakes by the receivers, offensive line maybe not being at its best, right? And Ernest Green, they took him out of the lineup today. They put in Monroe Freeling. It worked. 0 sacks. Carson Beck was pressured at time, but used his feet, got out of him. Great pocket awareness, worked with that offensive line. He's been banged up too. So I think that was a big factor last week against Ole Miss. And Georgia was like, listen, we can't. We put Monroe there on the left side. Maybe that will help us as a group, right? Because he's obviously hurt enough to where it's impacting his play. And Carson, he uses that. That's another factor that another guy protecting your blind side. I mean, that's another factor too. But he still, like I said, played exactly what we saw last year for most of the year, despite the issues at receiver and all the negativity, which those folks are probably already in bed, like I said, because there's nothing really negative to talk about this game, this team today. Defensively, Smile Mondanin, who I mentioned earlier, 8 tackles, sack, tackle for loss, pass breakup. It's so big having him back in the lineup. KJ Bolden had a great day. 8 tackles. Jalen Walker, sack. Chaz Chambliss. Hold on. Let's give our flowers to old Chaz because there's a lot of negativity on Chaz. He can't set the edge. He's too slow. 2 sacks. He's having a great season. So physical. He is that tone setter on the edge. He really is. Sure, does he get beat sometimes? Absolutely. Kristen Miller, good game. Raylan Wilson and those inside backers as a group played really well. Dan Jackson, such a great story, man. I love a former walk-on. That's awesome, dude. 6th season, right? Banged up for a large part of the year. Comes in, has added a different level of physicality to that secondary. He comes head hunting. Absolutely. He's a head hunter, man. And I just respect that so much watching him play. And receiver-wise, I think Oscar Delp and Dylan Bell, and dude, Dylan Bell being out is we'll see what his injury is. I'm not sure. Kirby's probably talking about it as we speak. So we'll learn a little bit, hopefully, if Kirby decides to actually talk about injuries. But when he went out, it was kind of like, okay, we're going to put in Nitro Tuggle, who I think he made some good plays. He was getting separation here and there, which is good to see. Give these young pups some chances, right? Because your elder statesmen in that room are having a tough season. Get some new life in there, right? Push them a little bit because having a young guy right there competing for snaps pushes you as an older guy. So I love that move. Put him in. Let him play. But when Dylan Bell goes out, it's kind of on the tight ends there, and Oscar Delp had probably a career game. And, we have not talked about him much this season for one reason or the other, but 4 catches, 56 yards, 2 touchdowns. Benjamin Yurcek led the stinking team in receiving 5 for 51. And a lot of that was just play design. I mean, Bobo was in his bag. Just the play action, the movement, right? Pulling guards on a play action and then hitting backside on a crosser. Did that multiple times. I mean, it was like it was almost the perfect play for each set Tennessee was running. They're running man. Okay, we're going to run crossers. We're going to play action. And they're both open. Pick one. They're both going to work out. Very impressive. And I think this showed, college football. I think it showed Kirby Smart and this staff that Texas and that performance at Texas was not a fluke. This is what we could do. And this schedule has been so difficult. Imagine, Georgia fans, with me, if you played Missouri's schedule, right? If you played a schedule like that. Heck, if you even played Ole Miss's schedule. What would the feeling, what would the record be, obviously? What would the feeling be around your team? Georgia has the number 1 strength of schedule, and they just got another top 10 win. Second of the season. Right? You lose to Bama on the road in week 4 by a touchdown. They're number 10. They're going to move up this week as well. I mean, it's incredible, really. And then Ole Miss, how good they are, makes Georgia look really good too. So as far as, where do we go from now? Let's get into that. The SEC championship is not out of play. Needs some help, obviously, right? Because Texas and A&M have one loss. Both have one loss, but they face each other at the end of the season. Texas didn't look great against Arkansas, and I'm not going to say they're worse than we think they are. Georgia took care of business, but I also put a lot of stock in an SEC schedule going on the road and playing these teams as well. So, can Texas end the season perfectly? Because I'm pretty sure. Let's look it up. I might as well, guys. Thanks for bearing with me here. Let's look at Texas's schedule here. Some cameras shaking there from the old computer. They got all right, listen. Kentucky, not an easy out. We know. Georgia fans know about that. And then you play A&M, right? A slip up there to either or 2 would be great for Georgia's chances of getting to Atlanta. But a slip up there to A&M. What does A&M do? Do they drop one as well? Easier slate for A&M right now. That game is going to be huge. It's probably going to decide who has at least one sideline of that SEC championship. And then what happens after that? I mean, it comes down to tiebreakers and stuff, and it would probably take us an hour to figure out those. But Georgia still has that. Still has a chance to getting to Atlanta. Need some help with 2 losses. Playoff, you're going to be ranked in the top 12. You should really be 5, I think. And here's my point, because BYU, they were struggling the last time I looked at their game. I don't know if they ended up winning or they're probably still playing right now. They were losing in their game. Oregon, won by 3 points against Wisconsin. Oregon has played basically one team, and that is Ohio State. Ohio State has played 2 teams, and that is Oregon and Penn State. We don't know anything about Penn State. Penn State has not played a soul, and the time they did play a soul, Ohio State, they lost. So that's the thing with the Big Ten. It's always it's a year-to-year basis. You go undefeated in that conference, you play the big dog, and you lose. But we don't know how to absolutely judge you because you just blow everybody out in that conference. That's the tough thing. Now, technically, if we're thinking about strength of schedule, the people you've beaten, Georgia has to be in talent. And a quarterback. I mean, a quarterback's playing like that. Third leading passer in the country last season. He's getting back to his former self of the last 2 games. I think decision-making wise, kind of got out of that slump. That's a number 5 team at least, right? And we'll give credit for the 2 losses. Number 5. That's my opinion. But we'll see what they say because, the committee told Georgia that basically your strength of schedule does not matter by ranking them where they did last week. But now Georgia and what they've done was, right, I mean, last year and how it happened as the number 1 team dropping out to number 6, 3-point loss in the SEC championship to Nick Saban and company, right? And you don't want as a Georgia fan, we talked about this a little bit. You don't want to give them the opportunity to set you out of the playoff, the top 12. And Georgia, they took care of business today, so it really does not matter. They're going to be in. Now, the committee should give Georgia credit also for this win over Georgia Tech at the end of the season. Now, UMass, whatever, it's basically an off week, right? Get some rest for your starters. Georgia Tech, they took down Miami. That's a tough team. They played Georgia tough last year. Brent Key, big fan of his. I think that program is going to get much better the next few years. They got some dudes that can run the stinking rock. That's a tough game too. Georgia committee should give credit to Georgia for that win as well. Will they? That's the question. We'll see. Because then it comes to a point to where if you don't make the SEC championship, are you hosting? Are you visiting in the playoff? Imagine going to visit one of these Midwestern or schools like that in a cold environment and stuff like that. All that will play out, but I'm just kind of spitballing here of what could happen. I think it's great for college football. I really do. I think there was a lot of doubt going into it about will this, kind of lessen the weight for each week. And that's what made college football so special, right? The NFL, you don't have that. No team's going to go undefeated. I mean, you lose a game one week, okay, we'll win the next one, and we'll get to the playoffs and maybe to the Super Bowl. Not that big of a deal. College football always had that in its bag. Why? That it was so special. People were scared. Okay, NIL, transfer portal, conference realignment, the SEC doing away with divisions. It's like, well, how is this going to impact the sport? Well, it's basically loaded talent all throughout the country, which has made kind of the SEC a parody a little bit because you have your Vanderbilts and your South Carolinas who lost a ton of players to the transfer portal and still having the season they're having. So I think it's great for college football. And I think this SEC thing where we're talking about, tiebreakers and such maybe isn't fun to a Georgia fan right now. But I think as a sport as a whole, it's really, really fun. It's why we're having a great season, I think, for the sport. And the numbers are way up on everything. So, yeah, I think this is a great time to be a Georgia Bulldog. I'll leave you guys with that. I think we're about to go watch John Jones get back to the octagon. But enjoy your win, folks. We got UMass matchup next week in Athens, back in Sanford Stadium, and then we'll welcome Georgia Tech for some clean, old-fashioned hate, and I hope to be there for that one. So thank you so much, guys, for listening. It's been a much, much more fun show this week than last week, so we appreciate you listening and jumping in the comments like you always do. Tuggo had a good game too. I hear you, the better Bravo. Absolutely. I love seeing him out on the field. I think Georgia gets him involved, especially more next week, and an opportunity against UMass where you can get those young receivers some playing time. So looking forward to that. We'll be back next week, hopefully with Arthur Lynch, Georgia tight end. We'll see if we can get him on. Tough man to get, man, schedule-wise. He's in school. He's learning his ABCs, but we're going to try our best to get him back on. So thank you so much for listening, as always, and have a great evening as you celebrate Georgia's win over Tennessee.